a conversation just happened without you in it, about you, two people, one of them, the person who has been connected to you in whatever specific and significant form that the connection between you has been taking in the recent period, and the other one, a friend, whose role in what is about to happen is more significant than it might appear from the outside of the conversation. That just produced the three words, that changed everything. Just do it. Those three words in the specific and decisive form of a friend who has been listening for long enough to have run out of patience with the deliberating that has been happening in the interior of the person connected to you for the full period of the back and forth and the not yet and the almost but not quite, that the deliberating produced before the friend said what the deliberating needed to hear, to finally tip from the deliberating form into the doing form, that just do it, is always the beginning of. This reading has 4 layers, and I need you to stay for all 4, because the 4th layer contains something that will change how you receive what is coming toward you right now from the person who just heard, just do it, and who is now in the decided and moving form of someone who is ready to pour their heart out to the specific person this reading found, which is you. Welcome, my beautiful soul. Stay with every single word. The first layer, and this one is about the conversation that just happened in the full and specific form of what was actually said and what the saying produced in the person who heard it and who is now in a completely different interior state than the one they were in before the friend said, just do it, before the 3 words. This person was in a specific and exhausting form of internal negotiation that I want to describe precisely, because the precise description is what makes this reading land in the specific and personal way, rather than the general and approximate way that readings sometimes land when they describe the situation in the broad and warming form. That applies to everyone, and therefore fully to no one. The internal negotiation looked like this. They composed what they wanted to say to you in the interior form of the words arranged in the order that felt most honest and most complete and most likely to land in the way they needed it to land for the person they were going to say it to, which is you. And then they read the composition back in the interior and critical form of someone assessing whether the arranged words were honest enough and complete enough and likely enough to land correctly before committing to the sending of what was composed in the interior form that the assessment was assessing, and then they changed something in the reconsidering form of someone who found in the interior reading back of the composition something that was not quite right, in the form the composition had taken before the reconsidering changed it into the new form. That was then read back and assessed and found to have something not quite right in the new form that the reconsidering had produced from the previous form that also had something not quite right. When it was assessed, this has been happening for a while in the composing and reconsidering and not quite right form of someone who's wanting to say something was never the problem. The problem was always the finding of the form. That felt right enough to commit to the saying of it before the saying produced the landing in the specific and hoped for form that all the composing was trying to maximize the likelihood of before the saying committed to it in whatever form the saying finally takes. When the composing stops and the saying begins, and then the friend said, just do it. In the 3 words that ended the composing and reconsidering cycle that had been running in the interior of the person connected to you, by naming the cycle in the direct and impatient form of someone who has been listening to the cycle for long enough to know that the cycle was not going to produce the right form on its own without the external interruption of the 3 words that ended the cycle by simply saying what the cycle needed to hear to stop cycling and start doing the second layer. Stay with me, because this layer is more specific than the first. And what it contains is the part of this reading that I feel most strongly in the field around your situation right now, as the person connected to you has moved from the composing and reconsidering form into the just do it form that the friend's 3 words produced in the decisive and moving interior of someone who is now ready in a different way than they were ready before. The second layer is about what pouring their heart out actually means for this specific person in the specific situation between you, because pouring their heart out is a phrase that can mean many things. In the general and approximate form of something that describes an emotional expression without the specific content of what the expression contains. For the specific person who is about to do it, for the specific person they are about to do it to, which is you. What they are about to pour has 3 specific components, and I want to name all 3 in the descending order of what arrives first and what arrives last. And what the last one contains, that is the most significant of the 3 components in the pouring their heart out form that the just do it has now made possible. The first component is the acknowledgement in the specific and honest form of someone who is saying, I know this took longer than it should have, in whatever specific words your specific conversation delivers it in. The acknowledgement that the composing and reconsidering was a form of delay that cost something on your side of the space between you while the delay was happening on their side, without your knowing the full extent of the delay, or why it was taking the form it was taking in the composing and reconsidering interior that this reading has just described in the first layer as the source of the not yet saying that the just do it has now ended. The second component is the telling in the specific and direct form of what has been in the composing that was never quite right enough to commit to the saying of before the just do it interrupted, the cycle that was keeping it in the composing form rather than the said form that it is now, very close to becoming, for the specific person this reading found, what was in the composing that is now about to be said is feeling, specific and named and direct feeling about you and what you mean to the specific person who has been carrying it in the interior and composing form for the full period of the not yet saying that the just do it has ended by interrupting the cycle that was keeping the feeling in the interior form rather than the expressed form. That pouring the heart out is about to produce for the specific person reading this right now. And the third component is the one I want you to be prepared for, because it is the most unexpected of the three components in the pouring their heart out that is approaching. The third component is a question, a direct and serious and wanting an answer question about where you stand in relation to what they are about to tell you in the first and second components of the heart pouring that the just do it has made possible by ending the composing and reconsidering cycle that was preventing the first two components from reaching their expressed form. For the specific person, they were always going to be expressed to, which is you. The question is some version of, is there still space for me in the specific and vulnerable form of someone who is pouring their heart out and who needs to know? After the pouring, whether the space they are pouring into is still available in the form they need it to be available in for what they are pouring to have somewhere to land that receives it rather than returns it in the unanswered and unreceived form of something poured into a space that was not still available for the pouring when it arrived. Is there still space for me? That is the third component, and it is the one I need you to be ready for. Before the heart pouring arrives in the full and three component form that this reading has been describing, the third layer, and this is the layer that made me stop and go back into the field around your situation. Before I recorded this, because I wanted to be certain about what I was feeling, before I named it in the full and specific form that this reading is delivering for the specific person it found, the third layer is about you and what this has cost you in the period of the composing and reconsidering on their side. That was producing the not yet on your side without your knowing that the not yet was a composing and reconsidering rather than an absence of the feeling. That the composing was trying to find the form for before the just do it ended the cycle. And the form became irrelevant because the saying was happening regardless of the form that the composing had or had not yet found. I feel a specific exhaustion in your energy that I want to name carefully, because the careful naming is the difference between being seen generally and being seen specifically in the way that matters. For the person who has been in the waiting form of the not yet that the composing and reconsidering was producing on your side without the explanation of what was producing it on theirs, the exhaustion is not the exhaustion of having waited. Simply, in the passive and enduring form of someone who was waiting and who is now tired of waiting, in the ordinary and understandable way of someone who has been patient for longer than patience is comfortable. It is the specific exhaustion of someone who was waiting while simultaneously trying to decide what the waiting meant about the situation they were waiting in and the person they were waiting for, and whether the waiting was the right form of the relationship to the situation, or whether a different form was required. By the specific evidence of the not yet that the waiting was producing as the primary experience of someone who was waiting, and analyzing the waiting simultaneously in the exhausting and doubled form of doing two things at once that each require the full attention of the person doing them without the full attention being available for both simultaneously, because the full attention was split between the waiting and the analyzing of the waiting that the not yet produced as its accompanying interior activity. That doubled exhaustion of waiting while analyzing the waiting is about to end in the specific and arriving form of the heart pouring that the Just Do It produced as the ending of the composing and reconsidering. That was producing the not yet. That was producing the doubled exhaustion of the specific person reading this, who has been waiting and analyzing the waiting simultaneously in the exhausting and invisible form of someone who looks fine from the outside while doing something very effortful on the inside. You will not have to do both much longer. The analysis of the waiting is about to become unnecessary when the heart pouring arrives and answers the questions that the analysis was generating in the trying to understand the not yet form of someone who was analyzing what the waiting meant and is now about to find out directly from the person who was producing the not yet in the composing and reconsidering form that the Just Do It has ended. The fourth layer, the one I almost left out, because it is the most personal and the most directly about the specific person reading this right now, in the interior and private form of what this reading has been building toward since the first words about the conversation that just happened, without you in it, about you. The fourth layer is what to do when the heart pouring arrives in the full and three component form that this reading has described, the acknowledgement, the telling of the feeling, and the question, is there still space for me? I feel a question forming in you right now. As the fourth layer begins, and the question is not the one you think it is. It is not, what do I say? In the practical and preparing form of someone who is getting ready for a significant conversation by planning the response before the conversation has arrived. The question I feel forming is deeper than that. It is, am I still in the same place I was when the waiting began, or has the waiting changed something in me specifically about what I want and what I am willing to be in, and whether the space that the question, is there still space for me, is asking about, is still available in the same form. It was available in before the waiting and the analyzing of the waiting. Did whatever waiting and analyzing do to the person inside them over the period of their doing? I want to answer that question directly in the most honest form available, because it deserves the direct answer rather than the gentle deflection into something more comfortable but less true. The space is still there. I feel it clearly in the field around your situation. Right now, the waiting changed things, as waiting always changes things. In the specific and particular form of someone who has been in the waiting long enough for the waiting to have done what waiting always does to the interior of the person inside it, which is produce the specific and clarifying knowledge of what matters and what does not, in the stripped down form of something that has been waiting long enough for the non-essential to have fallen away and the essential to have remained in the clearer and more visible form of what the waiting revealed by lasting long enough for the revealing to complete itself. The space is still there, and it is cleaner than it was because the waiting cleared it of the non-essential and left the essential in the visible and available form that is going to receive the heart pouring in the full and open and cleared form of someone who waited long enough for the waiting to do its clarifying work before the heart pouring arrived in the full and three component form that the just do it made possible by ending the composing and reconsidering that had been keeping it in the interior form rather than the expressed and arriving form that it is now, very close to being. Whew. I want to give you something before this closes. In the specific permission form that the waiting and analyzing simultaneously person reading this right now specifically needs before the heart pouring arrives in the full and three component form that this reading has been describing. Permission to stop analyzing the waiting. Now, not after the heart pouring arrives and provides the answers that the analysis was looking for in the trying to understand the not yet form that it has been taking for the full period of the not yet, that the composing and reconsidering was producing on their side. Stop analyzing now, because the analysis is already done in the specific and sufficient form of something that has produced everything it was going to produce from the available evidence of the not yet that the waiting was waiting in, and that this reading has just explained in the full and specific form of a composing and reconsidering that ended with just do it, and that is now producing the heart pouring that the analysis was trying to predict from the insufficient evidence of the not yet, that this reading has now supplemented with the full and specific form of what was happening on the other side. The analysis is done. The waiting is almost over. And the heart pouring is on its way in the full and three component form that this reading found in the field around your situation right now, as the conversation that happened without you, about you, has produced the just do it, that has produced the deciding, that is now producing the doing, that is coming towards you in the form that was always going to find you. When the composing stopped and the saying began, you are protected, and the space is still there, and the heart pouring is coming for the specific person who waited long enough for the waiting to do what waiting does when it lasts long enough to clear the non-essential and leave only the essential in the clean and available form of someone who is ready to receive what is coming without the analysis running in the background of the receiving for the first time since the waiting began. Take gentle care of yourself, my beautiful soul. The just do it has already happened, and what follows it is already in motion toward you